morning, church. How are you? Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. How many of you started a new diet this morning in the shadow of Thanksgiving? I hope that you had all your favorites and that you were blessed and that you were reminded of how much God loves you as you sat with the people that mean the most to you at Thanksgiving. So I also want to shout out to Ryan, who got our Advent series launched beautifully yesterday as we prepare for Christmas. Just a quick reminder that Simple Christmas is upon us, and those outreach opportunities are going to be for our church. And so we invite everybody who attends either physically or virtually to be a part of what God is doing with our Simple Christmas offering. So we find ourselves back in our Courageous Faith series that we're finishing the year with, and we're still in the Old Testament. We're a little further into the book of Genesis. So some of you remember the story, but before I get to it, I almost jumped to it too quick. Before we get to that story, some of you remember the story of Joseph, right? He's a young guy. He's got a bunch of brothers, and he's a little bit, shall we say, he's a smart aleck, right? So he shoots his mouth off. He's his father's favorite. And long story short, it ends up leading to him being thrown in a pit for a short period of time by his brothers, then sold into slavery. And so he goes through this series of betrayals by his family, right? So his father thinks he's dead. And then you fast forward, and then he gets betrayed at Potiphar's house in Egypt, where he is serving as the head of a household. And then he goes to prison for a while, and he's betrayed in prison. And then finally he's redeemed from that. And then finally Joseph finds himself as second in command in all of Egypt, which is a big honking deal, right? This is where we find the story. So there's a great famine that overcomes the land. And so Joseph's brothers have to come to Egypt and beg for food for the family of Jacob. And so they don't know that Joseph is who he is in Egypt. They think he's dead. And so we find ourselves in this place where they come and throw themselves before Joseph and beg for food. And so Joseph says to them, when he says in verse 18, chapter 50, verse 18, his brothers then came and threw themselves down before him and said, "We are your slaves," they said. They just humbled themselves, realizing that this very person who they had betrayed, this very person that they had written off, shut off from dead, led their father believe to be dead, is now responsible for their life and well-being moving forward. They throw themselves at his feet. But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke to them kindly. So, could you do that? Could you do that? To be betrayed so many times and find yourself at the end of your life and not being bitter, not being angry, not being revenge-oriented or vengeful. Could you do that? Some days I think I can. There are days that I think I can't. But Joseph finds himself in this place. And how does he find himself in that place? Well, because over a long, long period of time, he's been watching God redeem his story from brokenness and betrayal to elevation, and then back down to the pits, and then back to elevation. He's just watched God redeem him over and over and over again. And so now Joseph finds himself in this place where he has an opportunity to express that same kind of redemption to his family that he's experienced from God. So part of what I want to say to you today, church, is that faith is a long game. When you are a person of faith, you're playing a long game. We live in a world where we want our faith to be like instant grits, like you put it in the microwave and you have it and you can eat it in a minute and it's all good and all is fine. But faith doesn't always operate that way. Your trust of God sometimes doesn't produce fruit for years or decades, like in Joseph's case. So you need to settle into a place with your faith that you think, I'm going to trust God no matter how long it takes. No matter how long it takes for him to answer my prayers or to redeem a broken situation. So here's what I want you to think about as we begin Advent, which really is it's kind of 30 days of anticipation and just looking forward to Christmas. Think about how long the Israelites and the people of God waited for a Messiah. It's some 400 years from the book of Daniel to the birth of Jesus. That's a long game. That's a really long game. And so part of my message to you as we're on the advent of Christmas is to begin to see your faith as in it for the long game, not for instant gratification, but for delayed blessing. Because when it finally comes, we may be able to say, as Joseph said, what the world intended for harm, God only meant for good, or meant for our growth, or our sanctification, or our redemption. Faith is a long game. I pray that you do not fall into the trap of wanting to play the short version of it. It'll disappoint you every time. Church, I love you, and I cannot wait for us to celebrate Christmas together. It is hard to believe that December is right around the corner. Have an awesome week, and I'll talk to you soon.